as Americans are, gradually finding themselves more and more alienated from Britain, and both sides are hardening in their attitudes toward one another. By the fall of 1774, King George feels that they've crossed the Rubicon, that it is really going to be a matter of military showdown to determine whether Americans that he feels are actually trying to found an independent nation will be able to succeed or not. And so it's like they're living on a powder keg, and the spark comes in the spring of 1775, on April 18th, the night of April 18th, 1775, when a secret expedition of British troops marches out of Boston. They're marching toward Concord, Massachusetts, where the spies have revealed that the Americans have been gathering arms for this military confrontation. And the British troops, of course, the alarm goes out. This is the famous ride of Paul Revere, but he was one of dozens of riders, and he didn't even get as far as many of the others did. But they managed to alarm the countryside, and there's a confrontation that takes place in Lexington, Massachusetts, and then a few hours later at the Old North Bridge in Concord. And that's the scene that you see playing out behind us here. We've actually animated a period engraving of that fighting at Concord Bridge. And that's, again, a place, Concord, Massachusetts, that every American should visit at some point. You can stand on this ground today. You can see the house that stands up on the Barrett farm up above the river that still stands there today. And these are all objects which are witness objects to that fighting, whether it's a piece of wood that literally is one of the diagonal braces from the bridge that stood over the river on April 19th, 1775. That actually came out of the river in the 1950s. It was right there where the bridge stood. There was only one bridge made of oak that ever stood on that site. The river kind of changed course, and they moved the bridge to a different location. And so it matches perfectly the location and description of the bridge. So that fighting then brings soldiers from up and down the East Coast together. But what happens is, because the fighting sparks and men from all of those colonies stream together, they find that they have a ways to go before they see themselves as fellow Americans. And so this gallery is about the beginning of that quest for unity. The scene, we refer to this as a tableau. So these are actually life cast figures. We've pulled molds off of faces and hands and bodies and very carefully researched and hand sewn all of this clothing to sort of compensate for the lack of photographs from the 18th century. But the scene is based on a pension deposition of a man named Israel Trask. And in 1775, he was this 10-year-old boy in the red coat, whose father had brought him to war. He was a Massachusetts boy. These were Yankee fishermen who were in a regiment from the North Shore, north of Boston. They encountered a group of Virginia riflemen who had come in their fringed hunting shirts, trying to appear like American Indians. They come together in around the college buildings in Harvard College at the time, now Harvard University, and a fight breaks out among these men from these two different regions. And Israel Trask in 1845 remembered that George Washington rode into the scene, broke up this soldiers' fight. This is just the moment in which Washington is writing home to his brother in Virginia, talking about the challenges that he was facing of trying to get men for whom their colony was their country to think of themselves as Americans. And so we think this is sort of a wonderful storytelling device to point out how long that journey would be, perhaps a journey that's not even finished yet today, for us all to see ourselves as Americans, despite our diversity.